Hello YouTube, Millennium X17 here. It is now time to do the final part of the upgrade build to my gaming computer where I put in dual RX480s, the Nitro Plus OCs from Sapphire. Everything's already done. I've already done the tests, and here's the thing. Okay, I guarantee it, someone has already commented on the previous set of videos where I chronicled, the previous part I went over 3D Mark results before and after, and then I do the build before those. I think it might be one or two parts. I don't know at this point in time. I don't know how long I rambled on for, probably too long. I do not do this professionally. Okay, I need everyone to understand it. I do not do this professionally. Therefore, I do not have the usual suspects when it comes to benchmarking cards, graphics cards. A lot of these companies, like I've seen from the professional reviewers or YouTube reviewers, whatever you want to call them, they seem to be using Rise of the Tomb Raider, Hitman, there's a few others. I do not own these games. Therefore, I cannot test with these games. Again, I do not do this as my main thing on this channel. I just happen to have a gaming computer that is quite stout. Not the best thing that's ever happened to gaming computers, but it is, again, quite stout. And as such, I have a handful of games. It's a weird mix. And it shows interesting results altogether. Nothing groundbreaking, or no big revelation was had all of a sudden because I decided to put two of these Sapphire RX480s together. It's probably been done before. Again, they're at their stock to the overclocked settings that Sapphire put on these. So again, there's nothing shocking that's about to happen. Other than saying that it's been 2 days since this is being recorded after the fact, after everything else has been done. I've just been doing all these voiceovers, all in one spiel, all in one after the other, and the cards are in, they've been running, they don't overheat. For anyone who's, complaining that they do, they don't. Again, I don't understand. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and I explained that during the build video itself. But again, so this time, last time we did 3D Mark, which I complained, I didn't complain, I explained that I see that 3D Mark is its own great utility, but it's in its own sphere. It doesn't really represent video games as a whole. The real world of actually playing games shows you entirely different things. You don't have that much physics on the screen at once. So even though my CPU is the limiting factor now to my computer, I don't see that as a huge problem. I don't think that it's going to be it's going to really hinder me that much in games moving forward. Obviously, eventually it will, and it'll probably be updated as soon as AMD puts out a board that takes the DDR4 RAM, which they for some reason haven't done yet, which is, it's AMD's thing. They always seem to like to lag behind, which the technology is better by the time they do, I guess, and whatever. The 5 games we're going to be looking for that I specifically did before and after testing too. There's a few. There's one that I did a little bit more for. I'll explain the difference when I get there. And then I did a bonus game for the after, which I should have thought of beforehand, which would have been great. But nonetheless, 5 weird games that one of them used to be, and I've seen 2 of them I've seen pop up in graphics testing before. The others I really haven't seen at all because, honestly, at the end of the day, they're really not the, most sought after for benchmarking purposes. It's going to be Farming Simulator 2017, Fallout 4, Planet Coaster, Spin Tires, which is an older title, a DirectX 9 title. All the rest are DirectX 11, and the other main one that's before and after is Sniper Elite 3, the actual benchmark within Sniper Elite 3. That might be the most relevant test here, period. And then I did a bonus after the fact. But nonetheless, Farming Simulator 17, an interesting game that should be as boring as watching paint dry, but yet I find it endlessly interesting. The reason why I chose this one is because this game has an interesting issue with draw distance. I really hope Giants gets around to fixing the draw distance. It was the same way in Farming Sim 15. You can see out about 400 feet, and it's just crops and grass and other foliage will just be appearing about 400 or 500 feet out, and you can clearly see that far, and it's like it appears, and it's just so weird. But then even weirder than that, even more obvious than that, within like 100 feet of your tractor or your character, shadows will just suddenly appear. and it's very distracting. It's not the worst thing ever. I was wondering if the graphics cards were going to make any difference to it. It really didn't, ultimately, at the end of the day. The only real frame rate data that I have to go by is I don't like using fraps. I haven't honestly used fraps in 100 years. There might be better utilities to tell frame rate when you're playing a game itself. I don't have access to those. Again, I don't do this professionally. Therefore, I just use a little tiny frame counter with Steam up in this upper corner up here. From my previews on my Vegas, they look kind of blurry. I don't know how the end result's going to look like. They're going to be up here in this corner. You'll see a little tiny. I wish there was a way to make them bigger. That would probably help out. There might be. I didn't look at it that closely, but I turned on Steam's frame counter, and that's what I basically go when it's a seat of the pants feel. Again, nothing scientific. I don't do this professionally. Farming Sim 17, excuse me, before was 40 frames a second. Plus or minus, there were dips here and there. Never dipped below 30. Run smooth. I've been playing the game a lot recently. I've been binging that through most of November and into December. So after is 60 frames a second. And here's the interesting thing. I think the game is locked, is capped at 60 frames a second. I don't think it is allowed to exceed that, because all the this is a very apples to oranges test, because I accidentally went in after the fact and just wound everything up. In between the before and after test, I wound it up and it did better anyway. So it's like, but even more telling is when the second GPU is not being used, the second RX480 doesn't even turn on. And guess what? It's not turned on during this game at all. So one RX480 is better than two 280Xs, which shouldn't shock anyone, to be perfectly honest with you. Again, that's why I think there's a frame limit. The fact if there wasn't, I think maybe the second one might kick in. Maybe the game's just not optimized for crossfire. I don't honestly know. But nonetheless, again, I increased the graphics and it ran better. I increased, I think it was foliage, and it was multi-sampling and then anti-aliasing or whatever. Words you can't even pronounce, and words that only exist in graphics menus, to be perfectly honest. It did better, so great. Fallout 4 on ultra settings. I'll admit, admittedly, this is my, it's PC, so it's like a hack modded run where, it's a single player game too, so does it really matter? I put my character 165 and filled out the entire special tree, and that was the whole point of that. So, why not? I already beat the game legitimately on Xbox, Xbox, and figured I'd want to just, jerk around on the PC, and I'm in Sanctuary. I think the test is where I basically run out of Sanctuary, fire in the handgun, and run up to the vault and look out amongst, and, beforehand, low 20s, give or take, frame rate wise, from what I've seen. 23-ish, I think, would be the average if I had to guess at it. After is high 20s. I would guess if I had to put a number on it, 27, 28 frames per second would be the average after the fact. Looked about the same, though, to me, honestly. Fallout 4 does this weird thing with the... everything looks weirdly fuzzy, and then it'll focus in on the object, and then, and there's the object. And it'll be this weird pause where there's a point where, in the before is pretty obvious, where I get up to the top of the vault and look out over Sanctuary and the Wasteland, and it's just, it's fuzzy, and then it comes into focus. And it's just the whole game does this for me, and I don't know, is Fallout not optimized for Crossfire or AMD in general? That might be the case. I honestly don't know. Again, not a demanding location again. There's no real firefights, obviously. So, ultra max settings, again, Fallout's pretty demanding game. So, it ran it solidly enough. It didn't really dip hard enough that I did, I was like, oh no, the frame loss. But at the same time, not a demanding location, so that's still to be seen. But that's where I was, and I didn't really have time to venture off to a more interesting location. Moving on to another very interesting test. I like this one a lot, but at the same time, I'm kind of about it. Planet Coaster. If you liked Roller Coaster Tycoon back in the day, you need to get Planet Coaster, because this game is really awesome. It's a lot more complicated than Roller Coaster Tycoon back in the day was, and it's a whole lot better than Roller Coaster Tycoon World that came out now. But nonetheless, Ultra settings maxed out all the way. Before is what I did was basically I chose a coaster. I chose the desert layout, thinking that there'd be a lot of shadows and what have you. There really wasn't. It's just a plain flat thing. It's still an alpha, so there's not a lot going on. And this is the Steam version as well. And this is one of the games that I did a doubly after the fact thing, which won't have a frame, but I'll explain that when I get there. What I did for this was I basically chose a coaster, plopped it down, and then rode it in first-person perspective. Before, it was right around 50s-ish, basically during the menus and when you're building, what have you. And then during the ride, it dips down to the high 30s, 37, 38, give or take. After the fact, it's bouncy between 70 to 80, give or take. It can't really make up its mind. When you're riding the coaster, it dips down to the high 40s, but I think, honestly, the average is above 60, to be perfectly honest with you. It looks great. This game is so good. If you want to see the potential of this game, the guy on YouTube is Silverette is his name. If I remember to do so, I'll put the link in the description for his channel. He makes this game look really good. He's really intricate, and he takes 100 different thousands of different small parts for that fact, and makes this giant overarching structure that looks amazing and very well decorated and detailed. And that's kind of the problem that I had with this test, is that there's no real foliage or traffic or pedestrians or anything going on in this test. It's kind of very barren, so I'm like, it's not that good of a test. So what I did was I exited out of the Steam version of the game, which I have, and I opened up the Frontier launcher. Frontier is the developer of the game. I opened up their launcher because I did the pre-alpha phase of the game where it's like $75 to get the pre-alpha, and I did that, and I've been jerking on that. You load that one up, and I was kind of disappointed the Steam version didn't have this as well, but you load up that version of the game, and it's like an overworld of the world where you get to choose different other parks that different developers or other people have made. And I loaded up someone's little mini park. It had a steel corkscrew for those who played Roller Coaster Tycoon, and it's a little bit more of a representative test of the what you would expect during the game. There's people, there's everything going on. It's quite good. But then again, at the same time, not the biggest park in the world. The weird thing about Planet Coaster is the more stuff you put in, the more it tends to lag. This version of Steam seems to maybe gotten a little better about that. During the pre-alpha, it was kind of choppy. When you added a lot of stuff, it really chugged. So, but it works. I like it a lot. But that's the thing. The problem with the Frontier Launcher version is that there's no frame counter in the upper corner. It's not Steam, so therefore Steam didn't put the overlay on. But yeah, it ran smooth. It looks great. I'm really looking forward to getting into that game. I cannot wait. So, there's that. Moving on is Spin Tires. When I first fired up this game, I forgot entirely how to play it. Controls are weird. Camera's weird. That's what throws people more than anything else about this game. Is you're basically in Russia somewhere. You have to choose a map. I choose the Flood. It's the most recognized map for the game that the game is known for. And you get this truck with a tanker on it, and it's like an almost quasi over-the-shoulder camera angle where you're off to the side, and it throws people off. And plus, the game doesn't hold your hand. It doesn't tell you what you need to do, where you need to go, or anything for that matter. So it's quite difficult of a game. A lot of mud. A lot of mud. You will be scratching your head, bashing your head against the keyboard, trying to figure out just what the hell you're supposed to be doing. I love it. Again, it's just like Farming Simulator, or Euro Truck Simulator is another one that I like to play. That is just like, you wouldn't expect it to be as interesting as it is. I love that game. I like to put that on, play that on one screen, and the other screen I'll be playing like YouTube or something. But anyway, Spin Tires, DirectX 9 game. It's not really all that high demand. Looks really good though. It does look good. The fog and lighting in the game does look, and the dust particle effects do look. It is an older game, but it does look very good. Definitely not optimized for Crossfire. I could tell because beforehand, during the recording of it, the frame counter for before got chopped off. But I remember that was more or less. It was. If I had to guess, I would put it in 25 to 35, give or take, bouncing around in that place. Never really ducked so bad that the frames were like, ooh, but it never was that high. It was solid enough. And then after, it was about 35 to 42-ish is what the after shows. Again, I don't think it's that well optimized for Crossfire to begin with. It ran it better, yes. It still looks more or less about as good. I do like that game. Again, it's very difficult, though. And it doesn't hold your hand. It doesn't tell you what you need to be doing. And then finally, what I have for benchmarks before and after, there's also frame counters up in the corner because it's Steam, but at the same time it doesn't matter because this is the benchmark for Sniper Elite 3. And not a long test, but it's an interesting one nonetheless. Before, the average was 41.9. And look at, after the fact, it comes with this blank splash screen. It's like, this is your minimum, this is your maximum, and I think it was, or something to the effect thereof. But then at the bottom it says, go to documents / Sniper Elite 3 benchmark for more detailed information. It pops up a notepad document, and this is the data that I've got that I can actually physically show. That before, average was 41.9. After was 120.5. That's a big jump. Minimum 5 on both sides, before and after. Max frame rate on the before side was 152.7, and after was 322.8 frames per second max. That's a significant jump. That's more than twice. What is really telling though is the averages are huge jump. It's a smidge under 3 times as much on the average on the after the side. The total frames rendered before was 3,222. After was 2,000. Oh no, excuse me, I'm stupid. 9,229. That's smidge under 3 times as much frames were brought up, which would make sense because the averages were the same as well. So again, nothing big was revealed during this, but at the same time, these games really didn't choke under the way the computer did choke under 3D Mark. And again, I explained it. It's like you're never really going to have that much physics on screen at one time that's really going to make it a thing. If you want to do well in 3D Mark, obviously you need to have a super CPU to be able to really push that far. Mine being an FX8350 is dated. Smidge dated, but it's not like it's terrible. It'll do me fine for what I'm going to be using it for. And then finally, the other one I did after the fact is another really good game. Here's the thing, that's incorrect. It's not a game. It's a simulation to the finest degree that the definition can provide. No Limits 2 is it's basically Planet Coaster, but without the HUD and layout and intricacies of the quasi-similarities between Roller Coaster Tycoon and how you build the coasters all nice, and it's a lot more simplified and easier for the end player. No Limits 2 is basically Planet Coaster or Roller Coaster Tycoon with an AutoCAD program. It is that detailed. There is no limitations. There is no restrictions as to what you can and cannot do. It took me 5 hours of jerking with this thing. For anyone who's familiar with Roller Coaster Tycoon, the shuttle loop. Everyone knows the trick with the shuttle loop. You put it by the entrance and it just gives you money like nobody's business. If you charge per ride, that's where you make money in Roller Coaster Tycoon. And you put the shuttle loop by the entrance exit of the park, and for whatever reason, it tends to draw people in and it dominates with amount of money per hour. The shuttle loop is great. It took me 5 hours of jerking with it in this AutoCAD program of No Limits 2 in order just to build this roller coaster. And some of the creases that people do are astonishing. It's quite intricate. We took a ride on the Forest Hills Park, the Timberliner from Perspective. Ran smooth, was great. It's the demo version, so I only have those 3 right now. I'm hesitant to buy this game only just to ride roller coasters. As soon as I get a VR headset, then I might, because at that point in time I could VR ride on those coasters, and that would be freaking awesome because the sound design in this game is excellent. Again, I didn't know this before, but it was already wound up as high as it can go. It's limited to 100 frames per second. So, and that's pretty much where it's so it like hits 100 and it bounces between 98 and 99 the whole time. Ran smooth, runs great. Again, I like No Limits 2. It's really complicated to build in this game. I got through it. I could get good with it, but it is one of those things where you have to dedicate a lot of time learning what the hell you're doing, because it does not hold your hand as well. Again, it's not so much a game as it's a simulation. And that is the end of all of my benchmark testing. Hopefully I didn't chew everyone's ear up too badly. And again, the computer's running right now. These cards do not overheat. I didn't overclock them. They're just at their stock settings. 78 degrees is the hottest setting I saw during Firestrike Ultra. So during gameplay itself, I've seen 76 degrees. I haven't really seen over that in gaming. Again, I'm happy with what I got, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to be ready for VR when VR is ready to be, ready for me, if that makes any sense at all. I don't want to buy an $800, $800 headset and then play tech demos. Just saying, it's just me. The price on those will come down. The hardware requirements for those will come down with time, and obviously at the same time, with time, more games will come out for them. And at that point in time, I'll be ready to go. And hey, I'm happy with these cards. These cards are rocking it right now. I could not be happier with them. Even though I had that weird problem with the fan health check. Check the build videos for that. It's weird. They said I failed, but yet they cool just fine. Who knows? Maybe just the tricks software from Sapphire just sucks like everyone says it does, which wouldn't surprise me in the least. But nonetheless, that is all I really have to say about that. And until next time, guys, have yourselves a good day.